The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage. It was past midnight, and I was elbow-deep in the engine of Mrs. Henderson's ancient Mustang when I heard my wife Chloe's voice drifting through the kitchen window above. If I had a do-over, I'd never marry Jake. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Her laugh was sharp, cutting through the humid Dallas night like a blade. I froze, my hand still gripping the radiator hose, oil staining my knuckles black. I'm serious, Trevor. Sometimes I look at him working on those cars and think, what the hell was I thinking? Nice to know where you stand after 15 years, 2 kids, and a mortgage that's slowly eliminating us both, Chloe. I wiped my hands on the shop rag and moved closer to the window. Through the gap in the blinds, I could see her pacing the kitchen in her silk pajamas, the ones she only wore when she wanted to feel superior to everyone else in our subdivision. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and she was gesturing wildly with her free hand like she always did when she was building a case. No, you don't understand, she continued, her voice taking on that condescending tone she used with clients at her law firm. Jake's comfortable. He's settled into this little blue-collar life, and he expects me to be happy with it too. The garage, the neighborhood barbecues, the same conversations about football and lawnmowers. It's suffocating. I'd heard enough. Actually, I'd heard too much. But something kept me rooted to that spot, listening to my wife dissect our marriage like she was preparing for a closing argument. Trevor, you get it. You understand ambition. You know what it's like to want more than just this. Trevor Miles. Of course it was Trevor. Chloe's colleague from the firm, the guy who showed up to our neighborhood barbecues in his BMW, flashing his Rolex and talking about his latest real estate deals. The same Trevor who always found excuses to touch Chloe's shoulder when he laughed, who brought expensive wine to our game nights and made sure everyone knew how much it cost. I know we talked about this before, but I'm starting to think maybe it's time to make some changes. Big changes. The line went quiet for a moment, and I could hear Trevor's muffled voice through the speaker, though I couldn't make out the words. Yes, Chloe said finally. I think I'm ready to have that conversation. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. 15 years of marriage, and this was how I found out it was over? Eavesdropping like some paranoid husband in a bad movie? But here's the thing about being underestimated your whole life. You learn to pay attention. You notice things other people miss, and I'd been noticing things about Chloe for months now. The late nights at the office that coincidentally aligned with Trevor's schedule. The new lingerie that never made an appearance in our bedroom. The way she'd started criticizing everything about our life together. The house, the neighborhood, my work, even the way I loaded the dishwasher. I walked back to the Mustang and picked up my wrench. My hands were steadier now, my mind clearer. If Chloe wanted to have a conversation about big changes, then maybe it was time we had one. But first, I needed to do some research. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my office at Fairmont Auto Repair, surrounded by invoices and work orders, when my best friend Ricky knocked on the door frame. You look like hell, Jake, he said, settling his massive frame into the chair across from my desk. Ricky owned the MMA gym down the street, and even at 38, he could still break most men in half without breaking a sweat. Thanks for the pep talk, coach. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept? Or ate something that didn't come from a vending machine? I gestured at the stack of papers in front of me. Business is good. Mrs. Patterson's Mercedes needs a new transmission. The Johnsons want me to restore their 67 Camaro, and apparently half the neighborhood thinks I'm running a charity for broken air conditioners. That's not what I'm talking about, and you know it. Ricky had known me since high school. He could read me better than anyone, which was both a blessing and a curse. Chloe's having an affair, I said, without looking up from my paperwork. Jesus, Jake, are you sure? Pretty sure. She's been working late every night for the past month, always on cases with Trevor Miles. You remember Trevor, the real estate guy with the fancy car and the fake smile? The one who looks like he gets his hair cut at a salon? That's him. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. I've been keeping track. Phone records, credit card statements, work schedules, all legal stuff, nothing shady, just connecting dots. Ricky leaned forward. What kind of dots? Hotel charges on nights she claimed to be working late. Restaurant receipts for 2 people when she said she was eating alone at her desk. And this morning, I found a burner phone in her car. A burner phone? What is she? A drug dealer? Worse. She's a lawyer in love. I opened the folder and showed Ricky printouts of text messages I'd photographed from the burner phone. Nothing explicit, but plenty of "can't wait to see you tonight," and Jake doesn't suspect anything messages. So what's your plan? Ricky asked. Confront her? Hire a divorce lawyer? Something like that. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair. Remember game night at Will and Tara's this Saturday? Yeah, Chloe mentioned it. Why? I think it's time for some truth-telling. Ricky's expression shifted from concern to something that looked almost like fear. Jake, whatever you're thinking, maybe you should slow down and... I'm done slowing down, Rick. I've been the understanding husband, the supportive partner, the guy who doesn't make waves. And where has it gotten me? A wife who thinks I'm beneath her and a marriage that's apparently been over for months? I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the shop floor. Two of my mechanics were working on a pickup truck, their conversation punctuated by the hiss of pneumatic tools and the occasional burst of laughter. This was my world. Honest work, straightforward problems, solutions that made sense. You know what the funny thing is? I said, still watching my guys work. She thinks I don't know. She actually believes I'm too stupid or too trusting to figure it out. That's what hurts the most. Not the affair, not even the lying. It's the fact that she thinks so little of me that she doesn't even bother to hide it well. So, you're going to embarrass her in front of your friends? I'm going to give her what she wants. Freedom. I turned back to Ricky, and I must have looked different because his expression changed again. Jake, you're scaring me a little. Good. It's about time someone was scared of me. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of oppressive heat that makes Dallas summers legendary. Chloe spent 2 hours getting ready, trying on 3 different outfits before settling on a sundress that cost more than most people's car payments. Do I look okay? She asked, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror one last time. You look perfect, I said, and I meant it. Chloe had always been beautiful. Tall, blonde, with the kind of sharp features that looked great in professional headshots. It was one of the reasons I'd fallen for her in college, back when she still laughed at my jokes and didn't wince when I talked about opening my own shop. Are you wearing that? She gestured at my polo shirt and khakis. What's wrong with this? Nothing. Never mind. We drove to Will and Tara's house in silence. They lived 3 streets over in the same subdivision, in one of those McMansions that looked impressive from the outside but felt hollow once you got inside. Will worked in insurance. Tara sold cosmetics online, and together they hosted the kind of dinner parties that made everyone feel slightly inadequate. Trevor's BMW was already in the driveway when we arrived. Oh, good, Chloe said, her voice brightening for the first time all evening. Trevor's here. Lucky us. The front door opened before we could knock, and Tara appeared in a cloud of perfume and enthusiasm. Jake, Chloe, you made it. She air-kissed Chloe and gave me the kind of hug that was more performance than affection. Everyone's in the living room. We'll just opened a bottle of that wine Trevor brought. It's supposed to be amazing. The living room was exactly what I expected. Will holding court by the fireplace, gesturing with a wine glass that probably cost more than my lunch. Rita, Chloe's best friend and the neighborhood's unofficial gossip coordinator, perched on the edge of the sofa like she was ready to pounce on any interesting conversation, and Trevor, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad, sprawled in the leather recliner like he owned the place. Jake, Will boomed. There's the man of the hour. How's business? Can't complain. Fixed Mrs. Henderson's Mustang last week. Thing purrs like a kitten now. That's great. Will's smile was the kind you give to children when they show you their finger paintings. Trevor was just telling us about his latest deal. Sold a house in Highland Park for $2.5 million. Can you believe that? Amazing what people will pay for the right address, I said, accepting a beer from Tara. Trevor raised his wine glass in my direction. Different worlds, right, Jake? You fix things that are broken. I help people move up in the world. Interesting way to put it. Chloe shot me a warning look, but I was done taking warnings from my wife. So, Tara said, clapping her hands together like she was calling a kindergarten class to order. Should we start the game? I found this great couples trivia online. Everyone settled into their usual spots, couples on opposite teams to keep things competitive. Chloe ended up on Trevor's team, which was either a coincidence or the universe's idea of a joke. The first few rounds were harmless enough. Questions about favorite movies, dream vacation destinations, celebrity crushes. Everyone laughed at the right moments, groaned at the obvious answers, and pretended this was the highlight of their week. Then Tara pulled out the question that changed everything. Okay, this is a fun one, she said, reading from her phone. If you could do it all over again, would you marry your current spouse? The room went quiet for a moment. This was the kind of question that could either generate nervous laughter or uncomfortable silence, depending on how much wine had been consumed. Rita went first. Oh, absolutely. David's stuck with me for 12 years. He's not getting away now. Will and Tara exchanged one of those meaningful looks that long-married couples perfect over time. Definitely, Will said, though I might have proposed somewhere more romantic than a Chili's parking lot. Your turn, Chloe, Tara said. I watched my wife's face as she considered the question. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something that might have been regret flash across her features. Honestly, she said, her voice taking on that lawyer in the courtroom tone. Probably not. I mean, we were so young when we got married, and we wanted such different things. If I knew then what I know now. She shrugged, like she was discussing the weather instead of dismantling 15 years of marriage in front of our friends. The silence that followed was deafening. Rita's mouth fell open. Will suddenly found his wine glass fascinating. Tara looked like she wanted to disappear into the sofa cushions. Trevor, the bastard, actually smiled. Well, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. Funny you should mention that. I pulled out the manila envelope I'd been carrying around for 3 days and set it on the coffee table. What's that? Chloe asked, though something in her voice suggested she already knew. Divorce papers. Already filled out. Just need your signature. The wine glass slipped from Trevor's hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. Jake, what the hell are you doing? Chloe's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Giving you what you want. Freedom. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of my beer, enjoying the shocked silence that had settled over the room like a blanket. This is insane, Chloe said, but her voice wavered. You can't ambush me like this. Ambush? I laughed, and even I was surprised by how bitter it sounded. Chloe, you just told a room full of people that you regret marrying me. I'm trying to help you fix that mistake. Rita finally found her voice. Jake, maybe you should think about this. You're obviously upset, but... Oh, I've thought about it plenty, Rita. I've had lots of time to think, especially during all those late nights when Chloe was working at the office. Trevor had gone pale. He was trying to clean up the wine with a handful of napkins, but his hands were shaking too badly to be effective. What's that supposed to mean? Chloe demanded. It means I know about the hotel receipts, I know about the burner phone, I know about Trevor. The last word hung in the air like an accusation, which, I suppose, it was. Jake, Will said carefully, maybe we should all just take a step back and... No, I stood up, and something in my posture must have been threatening because Trevor actually flinched. I'm tired of taking steps back. I'm tired of being the understanding husband who doesn't make waves. You want to know what I think, Will? I think my wife has been screwing her colleague for months, and I think all of you knew about it. That's not true, Tara protested, but she couldn't meet my eyes. Isn't it? Rita, you've been Chloe's best friend since college. You're telling me you didn't know she was having an affair? Rita's silence was answer enough. I turned back to Chloe, who was staring at the divorce papers like they might burst into flames. So here's the deal, I said. You can sign those papers now, and we can handle this like adults. Or you can fight me, and I can start sharing some of the evidence I've collected. Hotel security footage, credit card records, text messages from that phone you thought I didn't know about. You've been spying on me? I've been paying attention. There's a difference. Trevor finally stood up, wine-stained napkins still clutched in his hands. Jake, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sit down, Trevor. I don't have to take orders from you. I smiled, and apparently it wasn't a pleasant expression because Trevor immediately sat back down. You're right, I said. You don't have to take orders from me, but you might want to consider how your wife would feel if she found out about your extracurricular activities. Trevor's married? Tara gasped. Separated, Trevor said quickly. We've been separated for months. Funny, because I talked to Linda last week when I fixed her car. She seemed to think you two were working things out. The color drained from Trevor's face completely. Chloe was staring at him like she'd never seen him before. You told me you were divorced. It's complicated. It's really not, I said. He's married, you're married, and you're both cheating. It's the oldest story in the book. I picked up the divorce papers and held them out to Chloe. Sign them. And if I don't, then things get messy. And trust me, Chloe, you don't want things to get messy. You've got a reputation to protect, a career to think about. I'm just a mechanic with a garage and a bad attitude. I've got a lot less to lose than you do. She took the papers with trembling hands. I need a pen, she whispered. Will wordlessly handed her one from his shirt pocket. As Chloe signed her name on the dotted line, I looked around the room at our friends. Former friends, I supposed. Rita was crying quietly into her wine. Tara looked like she was going to be sick. Will was staring at his hands like they held the secrets of the universe. And Trevor? Trevor looked like a man who just realized he'd bet everything on the wrong horse. "There," Chloe said, tossing the papers onto the coffee table. "Are you happy now?" "Not yet," I said, "but I'm getting there." The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and awkward encounters at the grocery store. Word spread quickly through our subdivision. It always does in places like ours. And I found myself on the receiving end of a lot of sympathetic looks and casseroles from neighbors who didn't know what else to do. Chloe moved in with Rita temporarily, which lasted exactly 4 days before Rita's husband put his foot down. After that, she rented a furnished apartment across town, close to her office and far enough from our neighborhood that she didn't have to face the gossip mill on a daily basis. Trevor, meanwhile, had his own problems. His wife Linda found out about the affair when one of her friends saw him leaving Chloe's apartment building. The divorce papers she served him made mine look friendly. I was in my office, reviewing the final settlement agreement, when Ricky knocked on my door. "How you holding up?" he asked, settling into his usual chair. "Better than I expected. The house is mine, the business is mine, and I get to keep my dignity. All things considered, I came out ahead. And Chloe? Chloe gets to start over. Isn't that what she wanted?" Ricky studied my face. "You don't look like a man who's satisfied with his revenge." "That's because I'm not done yet." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Remember how I said I'd been paying attention? Well, it turns out I've been paying attention to more than just Chloe's affair." "Jake, what did you do?" "Nothing illegal, nothing unethical. I just connected some dots." I opened the folder and spread its contents across my desk. Bank statements, property records, client files that had somehow found their way into my possession. "Trevor's been running a little side business," I explained. "He's been flipping houses using information from Chloe's divorce cases. Rich couples getting divorced, assets being liquidated, Trevor swoops in with lowball offers, then resells them for huge profits." "That's got to be illegal." "It's definitely unethical. And when Trevor's real estate license gets reviewed, which it will in about..." I checked my watch. 3 hours, when the state board receives an anonymous tip with all the documentation they need, well, let's just say his house flipping days are over. Ricky shook his head. "You're a scary man, Jake Fairmont." "I'm a thorough man. There's a difference." My phone rang before Ricky could respond. The caller ID showed Will's number. "Jake?" Will's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About the fact that you've been spreading lies about Trevor and Chloe all over town. About the fact that you've turned this whole neighborhood into a war zone." "I haven't spread any lies, Will. Just facts." "Rita's marriage is falling apart because of your facts. Tara's been getting nasty phone calls from people who think she knew about the affair. This has gone too far." "Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the truth is finally coming out." "Meet me at Murphy's bar in an hour, and bring Ricky if you want backup. But this ends tonight." The line went silent. I looked at Ricky, who had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. "You want backup?" he asked. "I want a witness." Murphy's bar was exactly the kind of place you'd expect to find in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a tax preparation service. Dark wood, cheap beer, and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged people to mind their own business. Will was already there when Ricky and I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with Trevor and Rita's husband, David. They looked like a war council, huddled over their drinks and speaking in low, urgent voices. "Jake," Will said as we approached. "Thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it." I slid into the booth across from them, with Ricky beside me. The seating arrangement felt deliberately adversarial, like we were negotiating a hostage exchange. "So," I said, signaling the waitress for a beer. "What's this about?" David leaned forward. "It's about you destroying people's lives for no good reason." "No good reason. My wife was cheating on me with a married man, and you all knew about it. That seems like a pretty good reason to me." "That was between you and Chloe," Trevor said. "You didn't have to drag the rest of us into it." I laughed. "You dragged yourself into it the moment you started sleeping with my wife, and now you're upset because there are consequences?" "The consequences should fit the crime," Will said. "You got your divorce, you got the house. What more do you want?" "I want justice." "You want revenge," David corrected. "And it's tearing apart everything we've built here." "What we've built?" I took a long drink of my beer and studied their faces. "What exactly have we built, David? A neighborhood full of people who smile to your face and stab you in the back? Friends who'll cover for each other's affairs but won't tell you when your marriage is falling apart?" "We didn't want to hurt you," Rita's husband said quietly. "But you were fine with letting me be humiliated. You were fine with letting me live a lie. That wasn't our choice to make." "And destroying my business isn't your choice either," Trevor interrupted. But that didn't stop you from calling the state licensing board. I smiled. Prove it. We know it was you. You suspect it was me, but you can't prove it. Just like I suspected you were sleeping with my wife for months before I could prove it. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. These men, my former friends, my neighbors, people I'd shared barbecues and birthday parties with, were looking at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Here's what's going to happen, Will said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when he was trying to close an insurance deal. You're going to back off. No more anonymous tips, no more spreading gossip, no more revenge schemes. You got what you wanted, Chloe's out of your life. Now leave the rest of us alone. Or what? Or we make your life very difficult. You think you're the only one who knows how to dig up dirt? You think your business is squeaky clean? Your taxes? Your employee records? I felt Ricky tense beside me, but I kept my voice calm. Are you threatening me, Will? I'm giving you a choice. Walk away now, or find out what it feels like to be on the receiving end of a coordinated campaign. I finished my beer and set the empty bottle on the table with a soft clink. You know what the problem is with you guys, I said, standing up. You think I'm the same person I was 6 months ago. You think I'm still the guy who doesn't make waves, who goes along to get along, who cares more about keeping the peace than standing up for himself. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table. But that guy is gone. That guy faded the night I heard my wife tell another man that she wished she'd never married me. And the person who replaced him? He doesn't give a damn about your threats. I straightened up and looked at each of them in turn. You want a war? You've got one. But remember, you started it. Ricky and I walked out of the bar without looking back. 2 days later, I was working under the hood of a customer's truck when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Fairmont Auto Repair. Jake? It's Linda Miles. Trevor's wife. Ex-wife, technically, since their divorce had been finalized the week before. Linda, how can I help you? I wanted to thank you. That caught me off guard. Thank me for what? For opening my eyes. I knew Trevor was cheating, but I didn't know how long it had been going on. When I hired a private investigator to dig deeper, we found evidence of at least 3 other affairs over the past 5 years. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and walked into my office for privacy. I'm sorry, Linda. I know this can't be easy. Actually, it's liberating. I wasted 10 years of my life on a man who never deserved me, but that's not why I'm calling. Okay. I'm calling because Trevor and his friends are planning something. Something involving your business. What kind of something? I don't know all the details, but I overheard a phone conversation. Something about health department inspections, EPA violations, worker safety complaints. They're going to try to shut you down. Can you prove it? Not in court, but I thought you should know. After Linda hung up, I sat in my office chair and stared at the wall. I'd expected retaliation, but I'd underestimated how far they were willing to go. My phone rang again. This time it was Ricky. Jake, we need to talk. Can you come to the gym? 20 minutes later, I was standing in Ricky's office, watching him pace back and forth like a caged animal. They came to see me this morning, he said without preamble. Who? Will, David, and some guy I didn't recognize. They wanted to know about your mental state. Whether you'd been acting erratically, whether you'd made any threats, whether I thought you might be dangerous. What did you tell them? I told them to get the hell out of my gym. But Jake, they're building a case against you. They're trying to paint you as unstable, maybe even dangerous. I sank into a chair. They're trying to destroy me. They're trying to protect themselves, and they're scared enough to play dirty. I thought about everything I'd worked for. The business I'd built from nothing, the reputation I'd earned in the community, the life I'd constructed after my marriage fell apart. What do you think I should do? Ricky stopped pacing and looked at me. I think you should finish what you started. Meaning? Meaning you've got them scared, really scared. People don't go to these lengths unless they're desperate. So the question is, what are they so afraid you'll find? That night, I sat in my home office with a bottle of beer and a laptop, digging deeper into the lives of my former friends than I'd ever wanted to go. Bank records, property transactions, business licenses, court filings, all public information, all legally accessible, all painting a picture I hadn't expected to see. Will's insurance agency had been under investigation by the state for fraudulent claims. David's construction company had been cited multiple times for safety violations. Even Tara's cosmetics business was operating without proper sales tax permits. They weren't just covering for Trevor and Chloe's affair, they were covering for each other, protecting a network of small-time fraud and corner cutting that could destroy all their careers if it came to light. And they thought I was going to expose them. They were right. The community center was packed for the monthly homeowners association meeting. I'd never seen so many people show up for what was usually a boring discussion of landscaping budgets and parking regulations. But word had gotten out that there was going to be drama, and in a subdivision like ours, drama was better than cable television. I arrived early and set up my laptop and a small projector I'd borrowed from the auto parts store. The HOA president, a nervous man named Gary who sold life insurance and collected model trains, kept asking what I was planning to present. "Just some information I think the community should have," I told him. Chloe walked in just as the meeting was called to order. She looked thinner than I remembered, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She took a seat in the back, as far from me as possible. Trevor wasn't there. According to the neighborhood gossip mill, he'd moved back in with his mother after Linda took him for everything in the divorce. Will, Rita, David, and Tara sat together in the middle section, whispering among themselves and shooting nervous glances in my direction. "Before we get to the regular business," I said, standing up when Gary asked if anyone had new items to discuss, "I'd like to share some information about financial irregularities in our community." The room went silent. "Jake," Will said, half rising from his seat, "this isn't the place for personal grievances." "You're right," I agreed. "This is the place for community business, and I think the community should know when local businesses are engaging in fraudulent practices." I clicked a button on my laptop, and the first slide appeared on the screen. Bank records showing unusual cash deposits into Will's business account, always just under the federal reporting threshold. "Will Patterson's insurance agency has been under investigation for staging fake accidents and filing fraudulent claims," I announced. "The evidence suggests a pattern of fraud going back at least 3 years. "This is slander," Will shouted, but his face had gone pale. "It's public record," I replied calmly, "available to anyone who knows where to look." The next slide showed David's construction company's safety violations, workers without proper equipment, buildings that didn't meet code, bribes paid to city inspectors. "David Chen's company has been cutting corners on safety for years," I continued. 3 workers have been hospitalized due to preventable accidents, and the company has been falsifying safety reports to avoid fines. David was on his feet now, pointing at me accusingly. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually, I can. I've turned copies of all this evidence over to the appropriate authorities. The FBI's white-collar crime division was very interested in your business practices." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Rita was crying openly now, and Tara looked like she was going to be sick. "And finally," I said, advancing to the last slide, "we have the real estate fraud scheme that connected all of these people." The screen showed a complex web of property transactions, bank transfers, and legal documents. Trevor Miles, with inside information provided by attorney Chloe Fairmont, identified properties owned by divorcing couples and purchased them at below-market prices using fraudulent loan applications processed by Will Patterson's agency and constructed using substandard materials from David Chen's company. I turned to face the audience, most of whom were staring at me in stunned silence. "The total amount of fraud we're talking about is approximately $2.3 million over 4 years. Money stolen from families going through the worst times of their lives." Chloe stood up, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You bastard," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "You vindictive, petty bastard." "I'm thorough," I corrected, "and I'm done being the fool who doesn't ask questions." She stormed out of the room, followed by Rita and Tara. Will and David sat frozen in their seats, probably calculating how long they had before the FBI knocked on their doors. Gary, the HOA president, cleared his throat nervously. "Well," he said, "I think that concludes new business. Meeting adjourned." As people filed out of the community center, many of them stopped to shake my hand or pat me on the shoulder. A few made comments about how they'd always suspected something was wrong with that group, how they'd never trusted Trevor, how they were glad someone had finally stood up to them. I packed up my laptop and projector, feeling strangely empty. I'd gotten my revenge, exposed the truth, destroyed the people who'd betrayed me. So why didn't I feel better? 6 months later, I was sitting in my office at the auto shop, reading the newspaper coverage of Will Patterson's sentencing. 18 months in federal prison for insurance fraud. David Chen had gotten 2 years. Trevor Miles was facing additional charges in 3 states. Chloe had been disbarred and was working as a paralegal for a small firm in Austin, as far from Dallas as she could get while staying in Texas. My phone rang, interrupting my reading. Fairmont Auto Repair. "Jake, it's Linda Miles." "Hey, Linda. How are you doing?" "Good. Really good, actually. I wanted to let you know I'm getting married again." That's great. Congratulations. Thanks. And Jake, I know what you did wasn't easy. Standing up to all of them, exposing the truth, it took courage. It took stubbornness. There's a difference. She laughed. Maybe, but either way, you did the right thing. After she hung up, I walked out to the shop floor where my mechanics were working on a restored 1969 Mustang. The owner was a young guy, maybe 25, who'd saved up for 3 years to afford the restoration. How's she looking? I asked. Like $1 million, Tony, my head mechanic, replied. This kid's going to be so happy when he sees her. I nodded, running my hand along the car's pristine fender. There was something satisfying about taking something broken and making it whole again, about restoring something to what it was meant to be. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it, expecting another customer inquiry or parts delivery notification. Instead, it was from a number I didn't recognize. You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy. I deleted the message without replying. Chloe had made her choices, just like I'd made mine. The difference was, I could live with the consequences of my decisions. I walked back to my office and sat down at my desk. Outside, I could hear the sounds of honest work, tools on metal, men solving problems, things being fixed instead of broken. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. They'd called me soft, predictable, someone who wouldn't fight back. They'd underestimated the quiet man who fixed cars and minded his own business. They'd learned better. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a new folder. Thin now, but growing. Because word had gotten around about what I'd done, and people had started coming to me with their own problems. Cheating spouses, crooked business partners, friends who weren't really friends. Turns out there's a market for someone who knows how to pay attention, how to connect dots, how to find the truth that people try to hide. I opened the first case file and began to read. A woman named Sarah whose business partner was embezzling money. Another straightforward problem with a straightforward solution. I picked up my pen and started taking notes. After all, I had a reputation to maintain.